Hey guys, welcome back to our YouTube channel. Hope you guys are doing great. So I wanted to create another Flutter video and I wanted to take you guys through a challenging problem statement that we faced while developing an app of our own. I wanted to share our solution with you guys so that if you are facing a similar problem, it'll be really helpful for you guys. And if you guys can come back and tell me that, hey, your solution is trash and I have a better solution, please kick my ass in the comments. And it's going to be a win-win situation at the end of the day, right? So I'll be open to it. So let's discuss the problem. So the problem's use case is very similar to apps like Truecaller and AppLock, wherein even if your current application is not really active, it is listening to certain triggers on your phone in the background. Based on those triggers, it probably shows up a pop-up or some kind of a logic is executed, right? So for example, in Truecaller, whenever you get a call, a pop-up shows up saying that, hey, this is the call, this is the contact, and whether it's spam or not. In AppLock, whenever you have opened an application that you set a lock on, the overlay comes up and it kind of locks the application. So our problem statement is going to be very simple and it's going to be similar to this. The problem statement is this. I want to select certain installed applications in my phone and keep them in memory. Now, regardless of whether my current application is in active state or not, it should constantly listen to when I actually open one of those installed applications that I selected. So let's say I select one of those installed applications, a pop-up should show up saying that, hey, you just opened this app. The problem is just as simple as that, and we will be discussing the solution that we implemented, and hopefully it'll be helpful for you guys. So let's just start with it. So let's discuss the solution. So let's break the problem down into three sections. One section is firstly, I need to get a hold of all the installed applications and somehow keep them in memory so that I can execute the logic only for them. Second is that I need to somehow create a monitoring service where I will be periodically checking whether this application has been opened by the user or not. And if the conditions are met, I will then create a pop-up, right? So for the first section is fairly simple. We will be using the Flutter package of installed apps and we can directly get the data for that and then store them in whatever database or whatever use case that you want. So that one is fairly simple. The main crux of the logic will lie in the second and third part. Now, the second part, to implement this, as our problem statement stated, we want the logic to keep on running even if our app is active or not. So this is a clear implementation of the background service use case, right? By the way, I have created a video on background service and it's a very in-depth video with the Android native code walkthrough as well. So if you guys want to learn more about it, you can check out that video. So we will be using background service to implement this monitoring service, and to determine whether the application was opened or not, we will be using AppStats. That is another package and a service that is provided by Android, which will give us details which can be used to determine when the app was opened and also trigger the logic accordingly, right? Now, to show the pop-up in the end, we will be using the overlay window package. And if you want to know about the implementation of the overlay window package as well, we have created another video on that. So I'll link it right here. You guys can go and check that out as well. So before I move on to the code, I just want to highlight one part which is slightly tricky here. So since we will be using AppStats to determine when the application was opened by the user, we will be mostly looking at two variables that are provided by AppStats. One variable is when was the last time the installed application was open, and the second variable will be the total time in foreground when the user was using the application, right? So we will need to figure out a logic using these two variables to determine when the application was opened, and we don't want to specifically trigger our logic when the application was closed. So that's why we'll have to tightly couple both of these variables and somehow figure out a logic accordingly. So I'm going to dive into the code right now and I'm going to explain the whole logic, and then at the end I'll also give a live demo on how the application looks like in action, and we can take it from there. So let's begin. Alright guys, so let's go through the code now. So as you can see in front of you, I have already set up this project, right? And I have kind of made a sample project already where I have done away with the logic that is not necessarily relevant to the video. That is, how do you fetch the installed apps, how you grant the permissions, and how do you select the installed apps. So I will just take you through the app itself so that you guys can have a brief understanding on how I'm doing it. And if you want to know exactly how, I'll link the GitHub repo as well, so you can have a look there. And if you have any further doubts, you can always ask me in the comment section as well, right? So before we go on, I'll just take you through the dependencies. So if you go to the pubspec YAML file, you'll see that these are the main dependencies that I'm using. These dependencies I had already mentioned in the solutions section. So this is straightforward, and Hive is something related to my implementation since I'm using this database for storing the installed applications. Okay, so yeah, so I'll just explain the main section and then I'll just move on to the app because then it'll be really easy for you guys to understand what I'm doing. And then you can just look into the code if you have some basic doubts, right? So in the main file, what I'm doing is that firstly I'm starting up the background service. I'm creating a singleton of a database instance that I'll be using, Hive in this case. And then I'm just checking whether the permissions that I require for this app to run are there or not. If these two permissions are there, I directly take you to the home. And if they are not there, I take you to the permission screen, right? So you can see here, the permission screen is right here, right? And the cross symbolizes that you don't have the permission. So let's just take the permissions here. So if I click on grant, yeah, it took some time. I don't know why. The emulator might not have memory. Okay, so I'll just grant the access, go back, grant this access as well. Okay guys, so we are back now and the app just loaded again and you can see that it directly took us to the home page here because the permissions were already granted, right? So this is our home page where we can see the applications that we have added. Currently we have not added any, so it's empty. So I'll just click on add right now and it'll show you the list of installed apps using the package that I just showed you. Let's just select contacts for now and Chrome. Okay, so if I select these two, what it effectively does is that it restarts the background service and it adds these two installed applications into the database. So I have access to these two apps in the database, and now you can also see that the Flutter challenge background has already started running, right? So this is basically what my app is now. In the end, what I effectively want to achieve is that since my background service is running, whenever I open up Chrome, like this, for example, a pop-up should come up. A pop-up should come up saying that, hey, you have opened Chrome, right? And not only that, um, even if I destroy my application, right? So even if I take this out, and I open Chrome again, the pop-up should still come up, right? So that is what we are effectively aiming for. So to aim for that, what we need to do is that we need to go into the place where I'm starting the monitoring service. And if you know about monitoring service, you'll know that this is the function that starts, that basically executes as soon as you start the monitoring service. So I'll go in here and you can see I have kept it empty for now because I'll be coding it live right now. Okay, so in this function, we would firstly want to initialize all the Flutter bindings, right? So I will just say ensure initialized, and then I will also try to get a database instance for myself from where I can get all the installed applications that we had pushed into the database, right? So I'll just say dot instance. Yeah, there you go. Okay, so after this, what I would do is that I would somehow maintain a set where I am uh, basically mapping the app ID with the usage app info that I get from the package. Okay, for all the applications. So what I would do is I would make a string, and then I believe it is usage info. Correct. Okay, so I will create a map for this, and I'll just name it as monitored application set. Okay. And this is where I will be keeping track of all the applications that I need to look out for if they are opened. All right. And since I have this, I can kind of register a listener as well here. Uh, so the point of this listener would be that if I want to stop this background service from outside, I can basically have a listener waiting here so that it will cause a self stop, right? And after I do this, now the setup for the background service is kind of ready. Now what I need to do is basically start a timer which periodically fetches the current usage stats and compares it with the previous one, right? So for that, I guess I will need a previous usage session, right? So I'll create another map, which is again the app ID as a reference, which will map it to the usage info, and I'll just call it use previous usage session, and then I will get current usage stats, and I'll just pass monitored application set here. Okay, so this is a function that I have already created, as you can see, and what it does is that it basically gets the app IDs that you're looking out for. It uses the package that I had shown you before, the usage stats package, and gets the data and then trims that data out for your desired applications only and sends back the data in this format, right? And since it's a future, I am using await there, right? As you can see here, what is the error? Cannot be assigned to the type application data. Okay. Oh, okay. Okay. This needs to be application data. Cool. So this is a detail that I created specifically, and I was expecting it there, so that's fine. So okay, now that I have the previous usage session to kind of use as a reference compared to the current one, what I would want to do is I would want to start a timer, and within the timer, I will give in the DB service, database service. I will give in the monitored application set, and I will also give in the previous usage session, right? So what I would want to do here is within the start timer, I would start a timer which periodically keeps running probably every 2 seconds or so, and it will get the current app's usage session data, and then it will compare it with the previous one, and based on the conditions that I had discussed in the solution section, we will determine whether the app has been opened right now or not. If that is the case, we will show up the pop-up, right? So before we go into the timer, let's just make this listener part here, right? So, um, okay, I don't need to define any return type for it. Can just say register listener. Yeah, cool. And I can basically say service dot. I need a service instance here, obviously. So I need a service dot on, and then I have already created an enum here, not an enum, a constant file here because I'm using this across my whole application, right? Sorry, I just made a right there. I'll just use stop monitoring service key dot listen, and then it'll listen to an event, and when it listens to this event, it just needs to call a self stop here. So I would just say service dot stop self. Great. Okay, so our listener is done. The setup of the background service is completely done. Now we can just go ahead and implement the timer, right? Now, I would expect this function to be of a future void type because I want it to be async, and I'll be using timer.periodic for it, so it'll keep running indefinitely till I stop it. So I'll name it as start timer, and I'll give in all the uh, variables that it expects. So it'll be database service, then it will be monitored application set, which is map comma string. Okay, and there will be the previous session, right? Okay. Okay. So let's draft the high level code for it, and then we'll go into the nitty-gritties of each side, right? So on a very high level, what I want to do is I want to start a timer dot periodic first. I think I'll have to get the async package. Yeah. And then I will have to go into timer dot periodic, and let's keep a duration of 1 second for now. Okay, so I can make a const. Uh, I can say seconds one. Great. And now when I have a timer, I would want it to run in an async manner, right? And I can put my code here. So now what I'd actually notice when you use timer dot periodically specifically is that even if you have a duration of 1 second, and if your inside function is of async type, what will effectively happen is that it won't wait for this function to end because it's an async type, right? So every second it'll keep on running, and there is a chance that your function has taken some time beyond 1 second and the next session of the timer periodic has already started, right? So if I to effectively counter that, what you can do is you can just cancel the timer here itself, and in the end of your function start it again, right? So this is like a hack to basically make sure that it waits for this async function as well within, and then only it has a timer dot periodic of 1 second, right? So this effectively solves our purpose. Okay, so okay, so now what we would want to do is that since we are calling start timer here, and we have a monitored application set which is empty, we would want to somehow set this monitored application set, right? So and we will use our database instance that we have here, right? So we'll use this and we'll just pass this in here. So what this will effectively do is that it'll look at the database service, get all the installed applications, and put those applications into the monitored set. This really helps because let's say there is a database change in without restarting the service, right? The background service, it will still account for it. So that's why I have separated the logic out here specifically. And then after I have the monitoring application set, what I would want to do is I would want the current usage stats, right? So I would effectively want in a similar format, I would want a string, comma, usage info, and I would want current usage session, right? And I can get the current usage session again using the same function that we had used here, right? So it takes in app IDs, but we have it named as monitored application set, if I'm not wrong. Yeah, cool. Okay, so now that I have the current usage settings, what I would want to do is that I would want to somehow compare the previous and the current ones, and if those signify that the application, one of the monitored application has been opened, I would want to start the pop-up up, right? So what I can simply do is that I can expect a string from a function which is effectively the app that has been opened. So I can say this, right? And I can create a function which basically is check if any app has been opened, and it will take in the current usage session, it will take in the previous usage session, and it will also take in the monitored application set. Okay, so using all of these three parameters, now this should return me back a string which is app opened and it's nullable. So if it returns null, that means that there has no app that has been opened. But if there is a string that exists, that means an app has been opened, right? So I'll just make a condition. If app opened is not equal to null, that means that this function has returned me an app and therefore an app has been opened here. I'll just use the alert dialog service that I have created, which uses the overlay window, this one, and I will say create alert dialog. Simple as that. And if I go into this, you will be able to see it just uses one of those show dialog is another util, and then it uses the function, the package, sorry, and just shows the overlay with a title. The title is null in this case. Okay, so this is effectively how I am going to show the pop-up. And now before I wrap things up, I also need to update the previous session, right? Because in the next instance, the current for now will be the previous for the next. So I will just name it as current. Great. So this is pretty much what the logic is going to look like. Now all we need to go ahead and do is firstly set this function and also this function, which is how do you determine whether the app has been opened. So let's go ahead and do that now. Okay, so let's create this function. Um, I'll just create it here again. And what it effectively does is, sorry, it takes in these parameters. So it's database service and monitored application set, which is also similar from here. Cool. And now I will just go ahead and firstly I will get the list of all the application data. So now application data is a DTO that I had created to store it in the Hive database, right? So I'll just say monitored apps is this one, and I will use the database service and get all app data right here, right? And now I will just clear this set that I have received here just to be safe so that no previous data that is not applicable. Now what we'll do is we'll go through the list of the application data here. So I'll just go in monitored apps. I'll have to name it as well. So let me just name it as apps. Okay. And I'll basically say monitored applications, monitored application set uh, app dot app ID is equal to app. So I'm effectively setting this map here using the database instance, right? So yeah, so we are done with this function as well. Now the only thing that is remaining is this function right here. Okay, so to implement this function, I have actually pushed this into the utils file here, right? And I have defined the function already, and these are the parameters that it's expecting. And now for the logic, I have added a comment section here. Okay, so I'll just explain what the logic for determining the app opening is going to be. So basically we have two variables, right? One is that when was the last time the app was used, and one is the total time in foreground. Now, if you want to determine whether the app was opened or closed, the last time used can be used because when you compare the previous and the current, if there has been a change, that means either the user has opened the application or they have closed the application. Okay, so once we have confirmed that this is the case, now to determine whether the app was closed or opened, we can use the total time in foreground. Now, what I had observed here is that the total time in foreground only changes when you close the application. So that means that if the user opens the application, right, the last time used will change and the total time in foreground will be constant based on whenever he opened the application. But as soon as you close the application, the total time in foreground changes to how much ever time you had used the application for. So this is going to be a good parameter for us to determine whether the app was closed or opened. So if the user opens the application, you can expect that the total time in foreground will not change, right? But when the user closes the application, you will expect that, hey, the total time in foreground should change here. So if there is a change, that means the user is not using the app anymore, right? So let's code this part out right now. Okay, so firstly, I will go through all the app IDs. So it'll be a string app ID in monitored application set. Cool. And I will firstly determine if this app ID does exist in the current usage. So contains key, yes. And it should also exist in the previous usage. Uh, right. Oh, I made it app ID, sorry. Okay. Okay. So if this is the case, we can move on. And now we need to verify whether is the last time used going to be the same, not going to be the same in the two cases. Only in that case, we'll move on from here, right? So I'll just store the usage info at least for both the cases. So current app usage is equal to current usage and then the app ID. And I guess I'll have to do this. Yeah. And similarly for the previous one. So previous app usage and I'll use previous usage. Okay, cool. So now what we will do is we will determine if the current use app usage dot, you can see the last time used parameter here, and we can just say if this is not equal to previous usage, last time used. Okay, right. So then we can move on and we just need to verify whether it is the opened scenario. So for that, what we can do is we can have another condition, current app usage dot total time in foreground. If this is not equal to previous app usage dot total time in foreground. So if these two are also not equal, that means that we need to return the app ID, right? So we'll just return the app ID. But if, yeah, else we don't need to really do anything, right? So this is the condition uh, through which we can determine whether the app ID was actually opened, app was opened or not. And if none of these end up passing, we'll just return null in the end. Okay. So why is there an error coming up here? Oh, okay. I need to say keys. Cool. So this is effectively how the logic is going to look like. And now we can just see whether all the errors have. Oh, this needs to be async. Mm, And yeah, I think we're good to go. So now we can just give the app a run. I'll run it again, and then we'll get back and see if it's working or not. Cool. So I just started the application again, and you can see that we have already selected Chrome and contacts here, right? And if you go to the notification bar, you can see that the service is running as well. So now what we would expect is that as soon as we open Chrome, a pop-up should come up saying that, hey, you have opened an app, right? There you go. So now you can see that this has been triggered by our application from the background service. So I can just click on this to dismiss it, and that's working fine as well. Let's try again. Cool. So this works. And now I had configured it on contacts as well, right? So contacts, there you go. So the pop-up is working completely fine. And when I go back, it is also understanding that, hey, the application has been closed. So, okay, I did not log that part specifically, but it's not showing up the pop-up here, right? So now we can also look at the condition where if is it working if I take this app away from the task manager, right? So let's remove it from the task manager. And now if I look at the background service, it is still running. So that's a good sign. Now let me start Chrome. Hmm. It still came up, right? So yeah, that's exactly what we wanted. I'm really happy. And let's look at contacts just to make sure. Cool, it's working for contacts as well. And now, just to make sure that it's not like a hack and it's not opening for every other app, I'll just open some random app. You'll see it'll obviously not open for settings or anything of that sort, right? So I guess that was a successful playthrough, and yeah, the code works fine. Okay, so this was our solution and it did a good job in solving the problem and we got the pop-up to work fine. So that was good. But I would definitely like to highlight certain problems with this solution that we have seen and hopefully we can come up with a solution later on. I'll probably make a video about that as well. So the first problem that we saw was related to the overlay window package. Now, whenever you have the package pop up a window, if you lock your screen and then unlock your screen again, right, it ends up making the pop-up untouchable and it basically does not allow you to access it anymore. So this is a huge problem from the user's perspective, and a solution to this would be really great if we could find one. Another one was that background services in general are not the most reliable when it comes to the way Android OS works. That is, you cannot definitely say that they will always be active. There will be these rare instances where the OS takes out the background service and your app ends up crashing. So for that, one solution that we probably can think of is that given that this can happen, you can probably create a notification or some kind of a user message asking them to probably reopen the app and just start the service again. But yes, this is kind of a hacky solution, and a better solution, if you guys have any, would be really, really helpful. So yeah, these were the two problems that we faced, but other than that, this app works pretty fine. And if you have a solution, have a problem statement which requires this kind of a logic, I guess it'll be helpful for you guys, right? So that was it for the video. If you guys have any feedback for me, please let me know in the comment section. And if you liked the video, please like it and share it as much as you can. It really helps us out. And see you in the next one.